How many people do you know that don't get excited about sports? I mean, sports is the American pastime, right? And it doesn't matter what sport you like. You get into it, people wear names on the back of the jersey. You would think they're actually on the team. They get so invested in. And you've got those competitive people, you've met them, right? That literally everything becomes a competition. Even like eating becomes a competition. They're just always competitive. But that's something that it seems that God has just put inside of us from the very beginning. All the way back in history, we see sports and competition. So I believe personally that it has a big, big part in our lives, and that God has a special place in his heart when it comes to sports. And today we're going to be discussing that very subject on this episode of the Audacious Faith Podcast. As we start off this podcast session, I want to play a little clip for you. I'm sure that many of you will recognize this call, even though it's from quite a while ago.
The game right now is at the plate. High fly ball into right field. She is gone! In a year that has been so improbable, the impossible has happened.
Any Dodger fan, or even those that have been around, know that that was the 1988 World Series. Vin Scully with the call, Kirk Gibson going up to the plate with two bad legs, wasn't even announced or introduced before the game because there was no plan for him to play, hobbles up to the plate, and against Dennis Eckersley, the premier relief pitcher in the league at that particular time, does something that nobody expected, hits the home run. It was a 3-2 count with 2 outs in the 9th inning. Absolutely incredible. I remember the day where I was standing. I was in my parents' living room. And you see, those who do the sports moments are a part of it. But those who report it and those who bring it to life help it to stay in our minds forever. My guest today is someone who does just that, someone who I appreciate. That's how I met him. He's been doing sports for years. He's also an accomplished writer. He's also a pastor in Burbank, California. A very, very good friend of mine, and we're going to have a great conversation today. That's Mr. Joe Torosian. So, Joe, Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much. And when my friends see this, will you make sure you know that Pastor Jay was the one that came up with the Scully intro? Because they're going to accuse me of wanting that, because that's a very popular intro amongst our friends.
He honestly did not know until right before I told him we were going to do it. He had nothing to do with it. I'll vouch for you right now on camera. So it's so good to have you here. We're going to reverse roles, because through the years, honestly, I came onto your show several times. You did Mid-Valley Sports Show for years. This is not a strange avenue for you. And I first met you in that particular role when you were reporting for Mid-Valley News Sports way back. So, but for those who don't know you well, or even those who do, let's do a little review. Why don't you go ahead and give us a little bit about you, your family, how sports has always been a big deal for you, and even how you got into ministry.
Yeah, and you cut me off if I go too long.
No problem.
But I'm an El Monte kid. I grew up in El Monte. I grew up by what used to be the O.H. Cruz Granary. King Court, it's down there where the new shopping center is, where the old theaters used to be. And there was a dead-end street there. And on that street, there were a bunch of boys with no dads. And so slowly, we got introduced to sports. And sports became that thing that kept us from drugs, kept us from doing things we shouldn't be doing. And you know, it's true, our athletes shouldn't be our role models, but they became the people we looked at. And so that's how we got involved in sports. And I can say that sports probably spared us a lot of grief in life, because that was our focus.
Yes.
And then around that same time, the Nazarene Church in Temple City Naz, had a bus ministry. I mean, this is like early 1970s, and they had been running the bus ministry for about 10 years, and what a different world. Sure. The bus literally just picked up kids on the corner, and they'd make a little contact with the parents ahead of time, and there was a fleet of about 4 buses that came to what they used to call the wrong side of the tracks, pick us up, this rowdy kids from El Monte,
Right.
and bring us to this land that I described often as Brady Bunch land, where we grew up, no dads, a lot of divorce. Between my mom and my dad, that my dad was my mom's third husband. My father was married 8 times.
Wow, okay.
And so there was a lot of what you would call classic dysfunction. And we get to this land where there's this church and there's these families together. And those families will never say they were perfect, but they represented something that was possible with the Lord. And that always had an influence. Discovered Sunday morning football, and I stopped going to church for a few years. I'm a diehard Rams fan. And then slowly started going back to church in high school, and then really dove all in. I think it was my senior year, and just after high school, I went to El Monte, and I found my place in there, went on a mission trip, and it was on that mission trip I discovered it wasn't all about me. And so my life changed, and it was on a mission trip as I went as a student leader in 1986. We went through Mexico outreach through Azusa Pacific,
Okay.
and we were in this village called Cuernavaca, a tent city. About 3,000 people are in there, and I had to go back and get something out of my tent as we were getting ready for chapel at night. One of our younger girls came back, and she was upset, and I ended up talking to her, and as we were walking around the camp while chapel's going on, pretty Mexico at night with balmy breeze, and you hear worship in the background. And we were just walking around talking, and all of a sudden, that voice that's clear but not necessarily audible that we talk about,
Sure.
the Lord told me, you're going to do this for the rest of your life. And I remember going, no, I'm going to be a sports writer. And I was already stringing at the Star News. I was stringing at the Tribune. And then I was working for one summer. I spent a summer in Bakersfield, and it was green in Bakersfield, and not romantic evergreen. It was what they call agricultural haze, smog. It was green. It was 100 degrees. I don't want to live in Bakersfield, but I was
Right.
working at this magazine. And slowly but surely, I thought I had my career lined up and I could ignore God. And then my connections at each place, certain, I don't want to say promises, but expectations of, hey, we want to get you involved in this show at the paper and the magazine. All those places just dried up. Editors changed. Different things happened. I had a writing internship for El Monte Cablevision for about a month. And I came to a couple meetings, and then I found out the grant was pulled, and I was out that. And then basically it came to a point where the Lord said, you're going into the ministry. And our senior pastor and our youth pastor left on the same day. They both resigned December 31st, 1989. And as we're all hugging and saying goodbye, he looked at me. My youth pastor says, Joe, you're leading the team to Mexico this year. I was 25, and how on earth a church trusted me at 25 with no real training or background except experience of going to Mexico, but they put 20 teens in my hands, and we went to Mexico, and that was, I view it as the trip that changed my life. And I finally had to confess to my girlfriend, who became my wife, and other friends, that I did have a call to ministry that I kept hidden for years. And one thing led to another, and that's where, and God eventually got to bring me back into sports writing and use it as ministry. And if I could add one thing.
Sure.
He took the talent that I had in sports writing, because I'm pretty confident in sports writing, but I'm not as confident as a minister. As a minister, I'm desperate. And I think as a minister, we should always be desperate for the Lord. But he took this one skill I had, and he placed it under him, where I was going to use it just for my benefit. And it took about 9 years, and God brought sports writing back in, and it's been an avenue of, I believe, ministry ever since. So,
Absolutely.
sorry
So
about that.
what you're telling is fantastic, because you have this conversation with God, basically, where God's saying this is what you're going to do for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
And then you told God what you thought you were going to do for the rest of your life. And God basically was saying, we're both right, in a sense, right?
Yeah, I guess so,
But
yeah.
he had
Great
his
way of putting
own
it.
timing.
Yeah.
I know it was similar for me with music. I was just totally music growing up. He took it away when I went to college because he wanted me to focus on ministry. And then when I come back into ministry, all of a sudden later on, he lets me use music again. So I don't believe God wastes anything.
Yeah.
I think he uses everything, but he just puts it all in there. So this is how we met then, the sports writing.
Yeah.
So here we are, we're at Arroyo High School. early 2000s. And honestly, I did not know you. I didn't even really know much about Mid-Valley News, except it was a very small little newspaper that I would see sitting outside the door every once in a while, thinking, how did this even get here?
Yeah, classically called a throwaway.
Right,
Yeah.
and so it was there, and I remember you coming up to me. It was Rosemead versus Arroyo. It was a big game. It was a league game, and we end up winning this game. And I have a confession after all these years to make, because you come up to me after the game and you say, what is it like? What were you thinking going into the game? You know about their streak and having to beat their streak. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, I have no idea what he's talking about. And that's my confession. And I didn't want to look stupid. So I said, oh yeah, well you just go in and you just prepare and everything. And it wasn't until I read your article afterwards that it's like, oh, they hadn't lost in 4 years? Yeah. I had no clue. I was just coaching.
Well, you handled it really well, because I didn't know.
Well, also being in the ministry, you learn to bluff every once in a while. But the thing is, I was thinking back on this, because this is 20 years ago now. Yeah. And I'm thinking back on this game, and of all the games that I coached since, I'm thinking, it's weird that I remember so many details of that game. All right? And I realized why. It was because I read over and over again the article that you wrote about the game afterwards, and that permanently etched it there.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so that's kind of cool. In fact, I still have it somewhere. And
That's
in fact,
awesome.
a lot of the articles that you would do during the time that I was coaching, including in my last year of coaching, which was something called The Streak or something like that, which I remember you doing. You probably don't even remember it, but I do. And so you said you grew up in this area.
Yeah.
And one thing you were able to do there, nobody cared about high school girls basketball, but at least in my eyes, you were able to make it kind of cool, something to kind of look at that no one else had been able to do. What caused you to have a passion to want to stay involved with high school sports, to want to stay involved in your community that you had grown up in? I mean, obviously you saw some purpose in that, right?
Yeah. I'll be honest, at the front of my career, and when I envisioned sports writing would be my whole life, no, I didn't have any interest. I'm going to go and be a beat writer for the Dodgers. I'm going to be a columnist, and I'm going to live my life, and I'm never going to pay to see an important game, and I'm just going to be, because it's not work for me. It wasn't work. Lord got control of me and whatever gifts I had under his authority. And if I had worked 2 weeks at the Mid-Valley News and the LA Times called and said, Joe, we made a mistake, we want you. I probably would have gone. But as time went on, I began to see I was doing, and I know people aren't going to think weird about this, even though I wasn't preaching and everything, I was doing ministry here.
Sure.
And so what I tell my writers, when we built staff, at one time we had a staff of about 20 guys working for us at Mid-Valley Sports and Mid-Valley News, I said, you might not know this, and it might sound highfalutin, but it's true. You're recording history. This is recording history, because someone's going to look on the microfilm or the microfiche 100 years from now, and they're going to stumble into this little thing about this little game that didn't mean anything, but you're writing the history for this area.
Right.
And I'm a little OCD about that, because I'm an El Monte kid. And so what I was stunned was when I did, because I don't like going to a game and not knowing what's happening.
Sure.
And so I did the research through Arroyo, because Mike Gorball did a fantastic job keeping his team's history, found out they had a 33-game winning streak.
Yeah.
And Tiffany Peterson was their girl, and I knew you guys was Cindy Poon. I don't even think Leanne was a freshman that year.
That was her freshman
year.
Yeah.
And Leanne Petnata.
Right.
And so I went there knowing the background. And I always felt, and I'm not slamming our guys at the Trib and Star News, I always felt I was better prepared because I did the research in the background, and so I was able to write a better story. Maybe it wasn't technically a better story, I don't put the commas all in the right place, but I was able to record something that people were going to remember. And so that was important for me. It was just, it means something. And when I find out a grandma looks online in Florida about something their grandchild did out here, that's the reward. That's it. And so I get a little OCD, and I got competitive, and I said, no, we're going to do this, and it just kind of grew from there.
It's funny you mention that, and I'll keep it very general in what I'm going to say right now. But I had a young man on a couple weeks ago on the podcast, and when I told him I was going to interview you, he mentioned one of the other papers, I won't say which one,
Okay.
and he said, do you know so-and-so from that particular paper? I go, oh yeah, I know who that is.
Yeah.
And he goes, can't stand that. you know. And I'm like, why? Because they never really knew what was going on, and it wasn't fair. It wasn't fair reporting, you know. And I said, I don't know.
Yeah.
But one thing I knew about you is like you were mentioning, you always had kind of the inside scoop, a lot of the details. Even if you would talk to some of the athletes afterwards, always made them feel comfortable. And so that was always a really good
One of
thing.
our favorite things to do is that we used to write our regular columns. We used to drop in Fate of the World.
Yeah.
And that's where we would talk about the Arroyo Rosemead game. Of course, the fate of the world will be decided, you know. And there was a time we noticed, and I don't think it was just us. It was because you had such a great run, and Mike Gorbel had such a great run in those days that those girls' games between your two Lady Knights, Lady Panthers, they had more energy and more passion than the boys' programs did, because you established culture and programs in both your programs, where the boys' programs for both schools were always in flux, new coaches all the time, and it was hard to build anything consistent. But that was for San Gabriel Valley for a period of years there. That was must-see basketball.
It was pretty exciting.
Yeah.
It was good stuff. And Gorbel, although we didn't always see eye to eye, I will tell you, I know he's a very prepared coach, always has been, and still is. I do have respect for him as a
good
coach.
dude,
So definitely. So you followed in here. So you mentioned early on in your call to ministry then, you end up leading as a young person. You were in ministry young, same with myself, so I relate totally, and leading youth. So how much do you think that ministry passion for youth that you had, that God then used that in the sports writing and everything else?
Well, it kept me around young people. So I spent 11 years as a youth pastor. And spending 11 years as a youth pastor, even as I aged, I was still familiar with the culture.
Sure.
You know, there was that thing where they used to tell the youth pastors, watch a half hour of MTV a week so you could stay. So I would never, in any imaginable world, watch Beavis and Butthead. But if my youth group was watching Beavis and Butthead, I was going to watch Beavis and Butthead. I thought the Blair Witch Project was the most overrated, overhyped movie I've ever seen. But I went to see it because my youth group was watching it. And I wanted to stay current. And so by the time I graduated from youth ministry and began sports writing, I wasn't coming back into a culture that I was unfamiliar with. And so I felt like God prepared me for this new phase. And so that's how I always viewed it. I've been around teenagers since I was 5 years old because of my brothers. I've never not been around teenagers.
Right. So in a way, do you still, I mean, we were talking earlier. We went out to eat ahead of time. So
And
you can all be jealous.
He bought.
Yes. So that made it extra good, right?
Yeah, it always
extra
tastes
good.
better when someone else buys.
Absolutely. So we were talking about the fact that even though the age comes, I mean, it's inevitable, but you don't feel old.
No.
Okay. So you think, looking through the lens, this is important because there's people out here watching right now that are our age or even younger that feel old. So is there, as God gives these opportunities, sports, writing, being around young people, God can keep a person young, don't you think?
Yeah. There's the chorus, and it's slipping my mind right now. I wanted to use the scripture, but the chorus, the steadfast love of the Lord. And I think there's a line in there. It's, they are new every morning, new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness.
Yes.
And that's it. He renews us through the Spirit every day. Right. And so I've got my own life. We've all got our own lives, but the Lord has given me a passion, and He's given me a good memory in terms of I remember what it was like to be the awkward teen.
Right.
To be the cool guy, then your hair go from straight to curly. Notice there's points on your ears, your nose is large, you're just weird, and you're not cool anymore. And I remember what it was like to be that. And those are the kids that I would come across in youth ministry. And our kids that played sports are a little bit better at protecting themselves from being seen like that, but they're all like that because every teen has those awkward moments.
Sure.
And if you have a moment or an opportunity to build them up, to just encourage them a little bit, and not with fluff, but to build them up and know that, and I know this is going to sound, I don't know how far I can go on this, but they are in the image of God.
Sure.
And so they're precious. And so maybe that wasn't always in the forefront of every article I wrote, but it was always in the back of my mind that I got to be real careful how I write about this kid and write about this student and stuff, and what's the end goal here. Keep it honest, but keep it at a point where we're going to build them up. and make them ready for the next phase in life, as we play a minor part, you know.
Yeah, and it's actually a very big part. I mean, you think about this. What are people looking for? I mean,
Yeah.
people want to be encouraged.
Yeah.
And somehow there's so much discouragement in the world. There's so much negativity that comes.
I can't tell you. I just got back from CIT Academy. I'm part of the board at Granite Ridge. It's a Christian camp up north. And we created a CIT Academy where we take some of our kids that graduated out of the children's program, and we're training them to be counselors in training. We spent an entire week just investing in them. And one of our pastors that's with us, she had them, the children, young people, I don't want to say children, write anonymously where they're at in their relationship with God.
Okay.
All 24 responded. I'm a youth pastor in my past. Not all 24 respond.
Right.
They'll respond with a question mark or some snarky, but they all
Sure.
responded with lines. And the overall thing was fear of rejection, abandonment, worried about does God still love them.
Right.
And we were getting this sense of why some of them avoid certain social media. This is their generation. They should be in some of that stuff. We expected them to be, but we were noticing some of them are afraid because there's this feeling they don't measure up. Even
Right.
if they're beautiful, confident, great grades, loved by a family.
Sure.
And this is something that's in the culture for these students. There's all this confidence on the exterior
Right.
that's pushed out there, but in the interior, these young people, you know, I would say where we had our issues, I think they still have our issues, but I think they're ramped up even more because their failures can be broadcast to the world.
Sure.
You know, and so your heart just goes out to them.
Right.
You know.
So
Sorry to get preachy.
tying in with this, exactly what you're saying, and you know, I think about how you had a responsibility and I guess a power that you, I'm sure, were conscious of when you were writing.
Yeah.
That what you wrote in that column could make or break a kid
Yeah.
in reality.
Yeah.
Because it's in print for the world to see. This is before social media was
Yeah.
quite as there. I know that there are so many times that I was able to go to the girls I was coaching going, hey, here's the latest issue of Mid-Valley. You wrote about the game. I never had to worry about what you wrote. I never had to worry about, you know, something was going to be negative that was going to make one of them feel bad. They were always excited to look
That's awesome.
in those
Thank you.
particular columns, and it was something that I could give out with confidence. And it would make them feel good to know that, you know, something they did, somebody noticed, you know, and it was something good. So were you conscious of that power when you were doing it?
When I had a mom tell me from Little League that after her daughter recorded an unassisted triple play, I just happened to be there.
Yeah.
And then I got a shot of her daughter playing third base later. And when she told me that her mother in Florida went to our website online and saw that, wow, this is something. There was a boy that played Little League baseball and he had a rough go. And I wrote a story, and you know, we write 1,000 stories, right?
Sure.
And his dad took the story, cut it out, and kind of placed it on a wood board and lacquered it up. And I'm on the sideline 7 years later at an Arroyo game, reporting on a game. He comes up to me and he says, you're Joe T, whatever.
Right.
And he says, I got your story that you wrote about me. My dad has it above my, and it's like, he's not playing ball anymore and he's just this awkward teen. And it was like, you know, we got a responsibility here,
Sure.
you know, and anything I said earlier, I'm not speaking negative about the Trib guys at all,
Right.
at all. And my thing was, I felt like to get up to their level, I needed to do my background and my research, and so when it came to time to write the story, when you're filling in word space and inches and all those things when you're writing, I felt like I had a little bit extra to go on to talk about maybe the emotion of the moment. And I didn't have to talk about the kid dropping the ball or anything, even though you mentioned it, but you didn't highlight it and stuff. So there were those moments, and it's like, wow, we got a responsibility here, and you know, we would check all of our guys. You know, we would check all of our guys. You know, be a little bit more straightforward when they were in high school, easier when they were in Little League and stuff, and then let the pros have it. You know, but
Exactly.
the
pros get paid enough.
The
to
pros
let 'em
get
have it,
paid
right?
enough. You know, and so yeah, you're right. I felt an awesome, I don't want to say burden, but maybe responsibility that you better get it right. And I'll say this, our former editor, Connie Keenan at Mid-Valley, she made that possible. She gave me that freedom.
Yeah, she was a good lady,
Yeah.
the way she did it. And all the people you were working with were all great.
Yeah.
It was pretty consistent across the
Yeah.
board there. So let's shift a little bit.
Okay.
So we're going to talk, you just mentioned about being a little harder on the pros. But,
Mm-hmm.
but one of the things that I've noticed, and you've probably noticed through the years, not all of them, but there seems to be a lot of pros in various sports that really go up to a high level. And then you find out that they're also strong people of faith. You think that's a coincidence? Or I mean, I know there's some that are not, but
You know, I think, you know, because I don't want to be a name it, claim it guy. I don't
Sure.
want to be, you give me this and God gives you that, you know, because we can give everything to God, but
Right.
we could still have a low bank account, right?
Yeah.
But He's blessing us in other ways. I think what the Christian life breeds is discipline. At an early age, if you're bought into it, it affords you the ability to say no
Right.
to the things that could lead you astray. I think it allows you to have an earlier focus. And I think it is no coincidence that sometimes some of those guys get there. And I think some of them who may not be Christian anymore, you usually find out there's a grandma or a mom or somebody in their past
Yeah.
that kept them on the straight and narrow, and then maybe they start living La Vida Loca after college and stuff, but
Sure.
as they achieve a certain level, there's something in their background that
Right.
required some form of discipline. There was somebody in their life that had authority that could say no. And we find that as those athletes and movie stars, and when they get older, they have less and less people likely to say no. But there's a mom or a dad or a family that'll say no, or even a deep-rooted faith in God that they know this is not pleasing to the Lord and I can't do it. And you were young, I was young. There were a lot of times that I had to end relationships, or I had to distance myself from certain situations because this would not be pleasing to the Lord. Not because
Right.
I glowed in the dark and was uber holy, but because I just knew it wasn't what the Lord had for me.
Right.
And I think for some of those guys, that's allowed them to get to that level.
to get to that point. So we see that, I mean, people follow and to the point even idolize
Yeah.
athletes quite often. And there's no doubt that athletes have a platform.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the case of the athlete of strong faith, obviously they have a platform for very good things.
Mm-hmm.
Then, of course, there are negative role models that are out there as well. We also see a lot of stuff going on in sports right now. It's changing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a lot of politics are coming in. All types of things are coming in. What's your take on that? You alarmed or what?
You know, there was I think it was a Michael Jordan quote that a sports figure who's kind of gained some popularity now, Clay Travis. He wrote a book, but it's the old joke that, hey, Republicans buy tennis shoes too. And I think it was a Michael Jordan quote because they were trying to get Michael Jordan involved in a whole political thing.
Okay.
And I don't know what Michael Jordan's politics are, and that's kind of cool. I don't want to know what Michael Jordan's politics are because honestly, when it comes to basketball, his opinion, no pun intended, trumps mine.
Right.
But when it comes to his politics, I really don't care.
Right.
You know, his opinion's no better than mine.
Right.
And he avoided that and did his business. And we're seeing that more now. And I think, you know, we see it in the sports because the more money you make, the more authority you have or platform you have, and there's no one to say no to you.
Right.
You know, LeBron James decides if Frank Vogel is going to be the coach of the Lakers. Let's be real.
Yeah,
I mean,
of course.
you know, Kawhi Leonard and Paul George are going to decide if Ty Lue stays because as
Right.
soon as those guys, because of the money they make and their skill level, as soon as they decide we don't want this guy,
Gone.
he's gone, and there's no one to say no anymore. And so they got freedom, and when you sign a contract, 4 years, 200 mil, or 180 mil, guaranteed.
No matter what, even if you're
Yeah,
hurt sitting
yeah.
on the sideline.
I can say what I want to say, and I think the problem with that for them down the road is they come and they go. The
Right.
line from The Natural has always stuck with me. If you saw the movie The Natural, Darren McGavin plays that sleazy sports writer.
Yeah.
Oh, no, Robert Duvall plays the sleazy sports writer. And it's the last game that Roy Hobbs is going to play. And he sits down next to him and he says, they come and they go, Hobbs. They come and they go, but I'm still going to be here.
Yeah.
Right? And it's true. They might think they have a standing and a position now, but the mob is brutal.
Of course.
And the trends change.
Right.
And who's here today is not going to be here tomorrow. Believe it or not, even Michael Jordan his presence has waned.
Yeah.
And
Despite the shoes.
and everyone wanted to
Right.
be like Mike,
Right.
right? And it's just how it goes. The powerful play goes on. It just keeps rolling on without you. And you better accept the fact that you might think you have a platform, but don't be disappointed when your playing days are over and you don't matter anymore. Magic Johnson is an example of that. He got into ownership, he got into his own talk show, he got into those things, and he just wasn't leading the fast break going coast to coast anymore
Right.
when he was at his pinnacle. And so, I don't know, I can't speak for him, but nothing else measures up.
Exactly.
you know.
Exactly. I was thinking the same example. I was thinking, wow, if I wanted to learn or teach people how to shoot three-pointers, I definitely would want Steph Curry.
Yeah.
But if I needed advice on a brain tumor,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
he doesn't know any more than I do.
Exactly,
right?
exactly. And we're taught that they do. We're kind of, I'm not going to say taught, we're encouraged to believe that they do.
Right. No,
You
they
know.
don't. So in addition to all the writing and all that you've been doing,
Yeah.
yeah, like I was just saying, you're actually a writer. I have a couple of his books here, by the way. Look them up. Joe Torosian. You can find where do we find these? On Amazon?
Amazon? Yeah.
Everywhere? Okay. So he told me when he brought these to me that there was no requirement to plug it, so I do want to
Which
clarify
None
that.
of my friends will believe, but
Yeah,
it's true.
it's totally true. I just decided I wanted you to know. And besides, when I get free copies of a book,
There
a
you go.
couple books, I definitely need to say something. So you'll want to check these out. Joe's a very, very good writer. Tell us, though, I mean, so this has always been a passion,
Mm-hmm.
and now you've been able to kind of combine it. Are your books ministry-oriented? Are they not? Or is it a combination?
Well, I've published 4.
Okay.
And one of them is called Faith Views, kind of a play off what I used to do with Fan View, my
Right.
sports column. And they're more devotionals. I originally wrote them for my church, and then so I just put about 31 of them together for a month. And I got a great guy, Pat Cherry, who made a great cover for me. And it's called Faith Views for Storm Riders. And how the Lord brings everything full cycle is that I ended up being a senior pastor, and we were doing VBSs and stuff. And some of these kids that weren't part of our church were growing out of VBS. And so we recognized we had an opportunity to do a Bible study. So, late in my career, I wasn't a youth pastor anymore. We started a youth Bible study on Monday nights called Riders on the Storm. And,
I like that.
and the reason I called it that is because at this age we're riding this storm, and we need the Lord to help us ride these storms. So it was called Riders on the Storm. And so then the idea came, let's put it in a book form and called Faith Views, and for storm riders. And so it did pretty well. And I distributed it a lot, and so that was mostly a devotional. My first book was Tangent Dreams, which is a fictional account of high school football in the area. You may have seen me make jokes about West El Monte Poly. If you look at my Facebook profile, I think it says I went to school at West El Monte Poly, right? And it's a fictional school on Flair Drive.
Oh, yeah,
And,
over there
there's
in the
that-
industrial area.
Yeah, and there's that open space that's been open for years down the
Okay.
street from Denny's. So I put a high school there and just did a high school football story. And there are subtle things in all my stories that talk a little bit about faith, just a tiny bit, because people aren't necessarily picking it up to be preached to.
Sure.
But it's such a part of our lives that I feel like I had to incorporate it. So that's Tangent Dreams. I wrote a semi-sequel to that, a shorter one called Temple City and the Company of the Ages, because in Temple City, football is pretty legendary. And it's kind of a fantasy high school football story.
Okay.
And then I also wrote a book about camps called The Dead Bug Tales. That is my favorite book because it covers a full week at camp. And a lot of characters, 500 pages. I got some good reviews, but the book didn't do as well as I was hoping it would do.
Okay.
But it's my favorite book. And that is just a week at Christian camp. And it kind of tells the story how everything goes through a week at camp and how the youth pastors are what they're going through on and off camp.
Wow, that's a
and
story
then
in itself,
What
yeah.
happens after, into the future. And then I wrote another one called The Dark Norm, which is set here in El Monte in late 1979. And it's about bullying. And if you read the foreword, it's just things I noticed and witnessed when I was in high school, and stuff that the Lord called me out on, in the sense that, yeah, you didn't do the bullying, but you witnessed it. And I felt some culpability. And so that was a hard one to write, but it was almost like the writing for me is like purging. I got to purge these thoughts so I could sleep at night.
Sure.
And so that's where I'm at now. I got another book now that I'm working on. I'm finalizing the edits. It's going to a traditional publishing path. I don't know if it's going to get published that way. If not, I'll publish it myself. And it's a more of an apocalyptic type novel.
Okay.
Not necessarily church eschatology, but the whole thing about the Walking Dead's a big deal, right?
Right.
And so I call it my Christian zombie novel. And it's a I don't want to say it's a fancy word, metaphor for sin, but the whole idea is we try to defeat sin by our own strength, and we can't.
Right.
We can only defeat sin by the Lord. And when you see those Walking Dead movies, the dead always keep coming, and sooner or later you run out of bullets, and you need something else. And
That is true, and we're all kind of walking dead without the Lord, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. So the dead, you said the dead bug?
The dead bug tales.
So,
yeah.
and I'm assuming because every Christian camp has dead bugs, is that
Okay,
where it came from?
we can't do it anymore, and you'll learn, because the book is set in 1991.
All right.
You'll learn that were things we did in the 80s that we can't do anymore, because we'd go to jail.
Right.
But we used to have camp. The staff would get there Sunday night, and camp ran from Monday afternoon till Saturday morning. We had these students for 5 days, and there was no zero tolerance policy. If we got the kids, we had to work with them. And so you needed to have a certain form of discipline. And sometimes we make them walk pine cones. If they snuck out of their cabin at night or threw a water balloon in a cabin, they'd have to walk pine cones in a concentric circle and talk to them. We talk them through it. Sometimes we say, just go hug the tree. And they go, what do you mean? Just go hug the tree. It's a beautiful tree. They go hug it, and then we'd leave them there for a good 5-10 minutes and then talk to them about what they did.
Yeah.
Dead bug was one of the things we did where we had them lay flat on their back and put their legs and hands in the air. And after a while, it really starts to.
Oh,
so
yeah.
30 seconds of dead bug is brutal.
Yeah.
And so we called that dead. I'm going to dead bug you. Get down here. And of course, this was a different time.
Right.
So the kids wanted to stay in camp. The parents wanted the kids to stay at camp. We didn't want them to go.
Right.
We wanted them to do something so they can stay at camp. Now, unfortunately, we wouldn't do that with a 10-foot pole.
Of course.
And so now it's unfortunately camps are Monday afternoon till Friday morning. We've lost a day, and zero tolerance. If they do something that's completely unforgivable, we have to call parents and send them home, and we don't get the chance to work with them anymore.
Right. It's kind of sad, isn't
Yeah.
it, the way things change? So you combine ministry, writing, all of this stuff that God's put together now. So now you're not as young as you used to be, even though you feel it, right?
Yeah.
What do you, as you look through the lens of everything that God's now put together, because like we said earlier, he doesn't waste anything.
Yeah.
And now he's brought you, everything that's happened in your life has led up to this moment right now. And a lot of people out there are like that. They're at a crossroads. I mean, they're right now having to look with the pandemic and everything else that has happened, take a real look at life and say, what's my purpose, right? So has God given you a renewed sense of something over this last year and a half, putting all these experiences together, and you have a thrust to move forward?
I hope I answered this right. I think the last year is just more of a crystallization of what he's always had planned for me, and I'm a firm believer there are no accidents. I think God has a plan, and just like his faithfulness, it's new every morning. It's new every morning, and we keep moving in him, and we get a clear idea. There is that example in Scripture, and I might be messing with it a little bit, but the spirit of it is, now we don't see clearly, but later on we get it, and stuff. And so for me, that's what it was, and that's always been in my life. I've always felt not necessarily destined for any kind of greatness, but that I had purpose in my life. And if you got a moment, and I hope it doesn't sound, I can share with you kind of
go ahead.
what happened in my life. So Lord called me to ministry in 1986. About a year later, I'm just on my couch. It's a lazy day. The Academy Awards are on. And I'm just kind of loosely watching it with my mom. Just typical, I went to work already. My day is over, yada, yada, yada.
Right.
And the Academy Awards come on. And there's protesters out front. I think they're pro-life protesters or something. And my mom made a comment, and she says, that's not going to work. Or she made some comment, and she said, out of the blue, she goes, I almost aborted you, like that. And I had never heard that before.
Right.
And I looked at her. She goes, yeah, I was was with your dad, and he told me he was divorcing, but he wasn't divorced. He was still married to someone else. And we had done it before, and we got pregnant with you, and we went down to Mexico for the abortion. And we waited at the doctor's office, and the doctor was late coming back from lunch. And maybe he was having another martini, I don't know. And he left orders for the midwife to perform the procedure. Now, they had gone to this place before, according to my mom. And then my dad, in a moment of nobleness, said, that just doesn't sound right, you know? And he had to get back because he had a family he wasn't telling her about. And she had to come back to work because I had older brothers at home, and so they were only about 9, 10 years old. And so they said, we'll just try to come back. Well, they never came back. And 8 months later, because that was January of '64, I guess, I was born. I never heard the story. And she was just going on, and so, yeah, you know, this happened. It was almost like she didn't know what she was saying. And I'm just getting this flush come through my whole body. And I go, oh, okay. And I went down the hall, and I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. I left the bathroom, I'm just like stunned. And all of a sudden, called to ministry, I was saved. Saved spiritually, but I mean saved physically. Man, things just clicked that had never clicked before. And all of a sudden, my mom, I hear steps coming down the hall, and my mom goes, I can't believe what I just said. And she is bawling. I don't think I don't want you, don't think I don't love you. I said, Mom, if I had heard that at 15, I might have been devastated. But hearing it now, and she didn't know about my call to ministry, she didn't know about anything. It was the game-changing moment in my life because God just kind of used that in a non-negative way. It was just my mom just talking that just changed my life forever, that I have a purpose. I have a plan. God's going to be with me. And I had no business being a youth pastor at 25, leading a group to Mexico, illegally serving communion according to Nazarene rules in Mexico, becoming, speaking at these camps, directing camps. I'm blessed. I could have been dead, and I have a wife and 3 great kids. I got this awesome church in Burbank. I got this awesome job where they paid me for 16, 17 years to go to work, cover sports. That's never work, you know? And so everything gave me a purpose, and I don't feel like I'm giving back. I feel like, and maybe people would think it that way, I feel like God has given you life, and I'm created in his image, and brother, you better just enjoy it and push it for all it's worth because I bought you at a price, you know, and you're created in my image, and you matter. And I'm not unique. I may be unique that I have that testimony, but I am not unique. We all have a purpose in life that God is, and I don't believe Jeremiah 29:11 is just applying to the Israelites going into captivity. He knows the plans he has for us to bless us and prosper us and do good for us. And so who am I going to trade that out for? Is this going to be pleasing to God, or is this going to be pleasing to God? And I'm going to choose what's pleasing to God. And so it's always given me purpose, and it's always been that thing that says I could write this and be a jerk and get a lot of hits, or I could take a little mental heat for looking like I'm not that journalist, and I hate the word journalist, call me sports writer, and do what's right. And so that's always been my canon, my rule, my gauge that I try to live up to, is that I was saved for a purpose and my life has meaning. But we all do.
Oh, absolutely.
I just have that testimony.
That's an incredible testimony, that story. I'm having this, you're going to have to forgive me for this, I'm having this weird Back to the Future movie like thought in my head. Like if someone were to go back like right to that moment and something changed and the doctor isn't gone. And like everything that happened after it is totally altered. How crazy is that when you think about it?
Marty, help Joe.
That's absolutely crazy to think of how much would have been changed just by that one minor thing.
You know, I try not to, I've thought about that. I don't want to go, I let other people do that. Because I've had a lot of blessings as a youth pastor, the writing, my senior pastor work, camp work, and I don't want anyone to think that, oh man, that wouldn't have happened without Joe. I'll let somebody else answer that question, but I think about that for other people. You know, the work you've done here, the work your producer's doing here. What would happen if it's the George Bailey story, right? What would have happened? You know, but God intervened and God had a plan. You know,
and I think what Joe is bringing up right now is very extremely important. to each one of you that's out there, because whether life has been smooth, whether it's had challenges, God has still watched over you and put you in the circumstances where you are right now. It has a purpose. And that purpose, as long as we still have breath, as long as we still have another opportunity today, there's obviously something that God wants to do, right?
Yeah.
So let's address that. We're going to start wrapping up here.
Okay.
But what I want you to do, I'm going to give you a grand opportunity here. All right? You don't know who it is you're talking to.
Don't put any pressure on me.
No
There's
pressure.
no math involved, right?
Maybe the new math.
Okay.
But the new math can be whatever you want it to be, right?
Okay.
So we're going to just put it in God's hands.
Okay.
And whether it's the first week, whether it's a year from now, whether it's 5 years from now, this is going to be on YouTube. Okay?
Okay.
So it could possibly even be on YouTube when both of us are gone. We don't even know.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody's going to be listening to this, and they're looking for that purpose in life. They're looking for that perspective that God's given you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, why am I still breathing? Why am I still here? Why, despite my challenges, you know, what am I supposed to do with my life? So I don't know what God's going to lay on your heart to tell him, but this is your chance to do it.
Well, I would tell you, it's one of the things that God's been driving home with me is I cannot stand, forget about the secular world, I get really frustrated with churchianity. And we don't talk enough about Genesis 1:27. We were created in the image of God. That means we were created in the image of the one who created all things. We, believe it or not, are the crowning jewel of creation.
Absolutely.
Maybe not all of our actions, and I've been a jerk too, so don't worry about that. We're not always perfect, but we're the crowning jewel of creation. And because God wanted a family. You know, he had his heavenly and he wanted an earthly family, and we are it. And we should never sell ourselves short. We should never think we're less than. This is why, one, I don't go with the science, but I can never agree to the outlook or the philosophy or the worldview that would limit me as to some accident from some primordial soup or some panspermia of some other civilization that came and laid some foundations here. No. That's what the enemy would have you believe, and there is an enemy, and I believe this with all my heart. There is an enemy out there who comes to destroy us because we are the affront who is God to them. Not that we're God, but we are created in our God's image, and because we're creating that image, we are an affront to him, and so he hates us. He gives us candy. He tells us things to mollify us, things to make it all go smooth and easy. But your life matters. Your life has purpose. And life is difficult and life is hard. But what is our life, right? Not necessarily a quote from James. Our life is a mist that appears for just a very little while. And instead of saying we're going to go to this city and that city, we ought to say if it's the Lord's will. We should be faithful to the one who's going to be with us for eternity. And so that's my thing, is that we've got one who's offering life and eternity and maybe 80 years of toil, 80 to 100 years of toil. But in the balance is eternity with the sovereign of the Lord, of all creation, our Lord. And so that is my thing, is don't sell yourself short. Don't sell anybody short. Look at those individuals that have disabilities, have different things. They are created in God's image, and it's to his glory that's going to be used. And so we live our lives with a huge purpose that I'm going to serve him and serve the kingdom. As Jesus came to save us, he also came to reclaim this earth and all of its kingdoms, and we get to play a small part in that. God doesn't need us, right, but he wants us. He wants us, and that to me is just something that when I'm down, when I'm struggling, image of God. Image of God. And it's also something that helps me when I'm frustrated and I'm angry with somebody. Image of God. That person's created in the image of God, and I'm going to love them because they're creating the image of God. Not the dogs, not the cats, not the horses, not the birds, not the trees. Love it all. It's beautiful, nice. I'm all good with that. But they are not the image of God. We're the crowning jewel of creation. And that's just one of my passions when I try to get across when I preach and stuff. So I hope that's not too...
Perfect.
Okay.
Perfect. Well, Joe, I just want, on behalf of our listening audience, I want to say thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you.
And taking the time to just convey everything that the Lord's laid on your heart today. If you're watching today, you want to contact myself or Joe, you can look us up online, or you can get to me through the podcast. I'll be more than happy to get him the message. Look for his books again.
Can I throw one thing out
go
at you,
ahead.
Jay?
Yeah.
I'm part of a kids camp.
Okay.
July 19th through the 23rd. It's called Granite Ridge Christian Camp. We've got a 90-hour prayer deal we're setting up.
Oh, nice.
And so the camp from 5 p.m. to 10 a.m., 5 p.m. on Monday to 10 a.m. on Friday, 19th through the 23rd of July, there's 90 hours.
Oh, okay.
And so we push a lot of 90 strong, and what we've got is an online sign-up, a very simple thing. We're not asking for emails or anything. An online sign-up that you could take a block of prayer. Every hour is broke up into 15 minutes. And so we're just trying to get all those blocks. We got 360 blocks we need to fill, and we're trying to spread that word far and wide. So every minute of our kids camp is covered in prayer, and you can see that on my thing. Maybe I'll hit share with you tonight.
Sure.
And they can see it on Jay's profile. And if you could just click on that and pick a 15-minute block, a couple of 15-minute blocks, we'd be ever so grateful. Because the one thing we do at this camp, we're very guarded, is Jesus crucified in that empty tomb and the image of God.
That's where the power is right there.
Thank you.
Right?
Thank you,
Oh,
Jay.
no problem. So go ahead and do that. And also, we just want to encourage you to share this podcast and other episodes with as many people. And if you're watching on YouTube, do us a favor and subscribe and get others to subscribe so you won't miss a single episode. Thank you so much for joining us today. May you be blessed. This was the Audacious Faith Podcast. Take care.